welcome, welcome, welcome. What a week it has been. What a week it has been. Happy 2nd of July. Is that a holiday? I don't think so. But happy 2nd of July. Welcome. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. If you have a question, send me a super chat. That's how this works. Super chat questions get answered. The way we do this is I give my opening remarks. Then after that, I do the roll call. I call out everyone as I see them, names and locations, names and locations. And then from there, I answer your super chat questions, and then the show is over. That's how we do it here. That's how we do it here. That's the 3 parts of our show. First part of the show is the part where I just talk and write down your super chats as they come in. The second part of the show is when I call you out as I see you. And the third part of the show is the part where I answer your super chat questions until they run out. And that's how it works. Now, I have plenty of unnamed diet beverage. Every time I open it, it sounds like I'm cocking a gun. I've opened the unnamed diet beverage. I'm pouring the unnamed diet beverage. And we are ready to have a show. I recommend good communist children's books. Oh. Communist children's books. Very good. Wrote that down. Folks, I'm just going to get started by saying that it has been a rough year for everybody. It's a little over a year since this pandemic began. It's been a rough year. And some of us have been lucky, and some of us have not. Many of us, audiobook. Many of us have lost jobs. Many of us have even lost relatives to COVID-19. Many of us have seen our neighborhoods devastated. Many of us have known people who have become mentally ill. Many of us have struggled with mental health ourselves. Cockshot labor. Many have known folks who have passed on, right? Whether because of mental health or addiction or because of the pandemic. Many of us have not been able to see our relatives or our good friends in a long time. We've been suffering in isolation. It's been a rough time. It's been a rough time. This has been a rough year for so many people. And how do we keep going? How do we keep going through all of that? Looks like things are starting to open up. I'm hearing stuff about this Indian vaccine, this Indian strand, the Indian strand. We don't know what that means. But how do we keep going amid all of this? Well, the way we keep going is that we have an understanding of the concept of dialectical materialism. Marxism. Long before Karl Marx was talking about economics, long before Karl Marx was talking about politics, Karl Marx was talking about philosophy. All right. Mass graves in Canada. Karl Marx was talking about philosophy. And Marxist philosophy is called dialectical materialism. And it can be summed up in a beautiful phrase. It's not even a phrase, it's a mathematical formula. And this is what it is. A does not equal A. A does not equal A. There is no way that this first A can be the equivalent of this second A. Because all things in the universe are constantly in a state of change. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus, Venezuela, import vaccines. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus, he said, "You never step into the same river twice." You never step into the same river twice. A does not equal A. No two things in the universe are identical. All that exists is matter, but this matter that exists is constantly in a state of change. And that change often comes about through conflict. First, you have a thesis, and then something comes along to clash with the thesis, and that is called an antithesis. The two of them clash, and the result is called a synthesis. And then that synthesis is a new thesis. And then along comes a new antithesis, and then you get a new synthesis. Rev. Punk. Scene. You get a new synthesis. And that this is how the universe advances. Change comes through conflict. All matter is constantly in a state of motion. And it is this understanding that has gotten us through the worst of times. If you want solid proof that A does not equal A, I urge you to look at the most populous country in the world, China. 100 years ago, a group of people met in the basement of a women's dormitory in the French concession of Shanghai, in territory in Shanghai that had been seized by the French imperialists. A group of Chinese people met in the basement of a women's dormitory, and they conducted proceedings to found an organization whose goal was to completely change things in the country. And that organization that met with representatives from across the country, the whole organization was only 60 people. And there were only 25 people in that room. And they came together, and they had a meeting, and they could not even finish their meeting. They couldn't finish their meeting because they realized when they took some breaks and went for a walk that they were being followed by the police. So to finish their meeting, they had to leave the women's dormitory. They had to leave the basement of the women's dormitory at the college. And they had to go and rent a boat and take it out on a lake. And on the boat, on the lake, the 25 people were finally able to finish their meeting. And they ended the meeting by standing up and raising their fists in the air and singing, "Arise, ye prisoners of starvation. Arise, ye wretched of the earth." They sang it in Chinese, of course, but you know what song I'm referring to, the theme song of international communism, Venezuela, economic zone. The theme song of international communism. That's what they were singing. A group of 60 people represented in a room of 25 people. One of those people was a guy named Mao. And Mao had been the leader of a group called the New People's Study Society. The New People's Study Society, sometimes translated as the New People's Study Group. Mao had been a follower of Peter Kropotkin, the anarchist. Peter Kropotkin, who wrote a book called The Conquest of Bread, who's also the inspiration of an entity called BreadTube, America's homeless problem. Peter Kropotkin. Mao had been a follower of Peter Kropotkin. Peter Kropotkin. But he saw what the Soviet Union was doing. He saw how the Bolsheviks had taken power and created an anti-imperialist government. So Mao Zedong and his New People's Study Group merged with some labor activists and some college professors and some intellectuals into a brand new organization that they called the Chinese Communist Party. That was 100 years ago. And today, an organization of 60 has become an organization of 90 million. 90 million. And a country that was full of malnutrition and starvation has become the second largest economy in the world. And millions of people whose ancestors lived in huts for generations, never had a chance to read and write, are living a very comfortable lifestyle. I've seen huge economic miracles. Facebook extremism. And folks, it wasn't one solid march forward. In fact, it was a long march. It was a long march. It was a very long march. First, the Chinese communists joined the KMT. They joined the Chinese Kuomintang KMT Nationalist Party. They were the communist faction of the KMT party. The KMT was a mass movement in China for independence, democracy, and the people's livelihood. The people's livelihood was vaguely understood to be a form of socialism, but it was a vague concept. The founder of the KMT party applied to join the Communist International, but Lenin told Dr. Sun Yat-sen that you are not a communist, so you cannot join, but you can observe. The KMT was a mass, progressive, anti-imperialist movement, but it was not a communist movement. But the communists joined it anyway, and they recruited from within. And they said to folks that were excited about Dr. Sun Yat-sen and nationalism in China, if you really want independence, you really want democracy, and you want people's livelihood to get better, why, you should become a communist. And with Marxism-Leninism and proletarian internationalism, we can achieve the vision of all Chinese people. We can create a whole new China that is prosperous and free. And then we know Dr. Sun Yat-sen died, and Chiang Kai-shek took power in the Chinese Communist Party, or in the Chinese KMT Nationalist Party, rather. And that Chiang Kai-shek engaged in a policy of persecuting communists and murdering them. And the Chinese communists who had worked in the cities, had organized labor unions, they were forced to flee, go into the countryside, and organize the peasantry. They were forced to form an army, their own army, the Red Army, to defend themselves from the attacks of Chiang Kai-shek and the KMT. And that then, from 1927 up until the 1930s, in the countryside, they carved out liberated territories. They redistributed land to peasants. They engaged in a program called the New Democratic Revolution. and that Trotsky spit on them and said, this is a peasant movement. These people cannot be revolutionary. And Mao Zedong and Stalin and the Chinese Communist Party and the Soviet Communist Party said they may be peasants, they may be students, they may not be from the factory working class, but that does not mean that they cannot adopt the proletarian ideology. That does not mean that they cannot join the proletarian mission. And as the 1930s progressed, in the early 1930s, they even established so much liberated territory that they declared a new government, the Chinese Soviet Republic was declared. They had their own flag and everything, the Chinese Soviet Republic. And so, 1933, 1934, Chiang Kai-shek made friends with somebody named Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler dispatched one of his generals, Hans von Seeckt, to go to China to work with Chiang Kai-shek to help crush the Chinese Soviet Republic. And when all hell and high water was brought down upon them, when they were barricaded and surrounded and bombarded by Hans von Seeckt and Chiang Kai-shek, that Mao and the Red Army had to pack up. They had to leave the Chinese Soviet Republic. They had to flee up into the mountains to escape the horrendous bombardment that had rained down upon them. And at that moment, Chiang Kai-shek, Hans von Seeckt, the reactionary landlords, the U.S. imperialists, the British imperialists, all grinned. And they said, that's the last we're ever going to hear of the Chinese Communist Party. That's the last we're ever going to hear of Mao Zedong. He's running off into the mountains. He'll be never heard from again. I wish I could have been there. I really wish that I could have been there. I wish I could go back in time and grin at Hans von Seeckt and Chiang Kai-shek and Winston Churchill and Rockefeller and Carnegie and DuPont and say, enjoy yourselves. Enjoy yourselves. But I've got a feeling you're not going to be too happy. Because what's happening now, you think Mao's just running away? What's happening now is the stuff of legends. Mao's not just running away. Mao is going on the long march. And the trek that Mao is on right now, going through the mountains, is going to be remembered as one of the most pivotal moments in the history of China. And Mao and his soldiers are going to be going from village to village and city to city, up in the mountains with people that have never had contact with civilization, haven't seen an army in generations, and they're going to recruit them. And you know what? Mao is going up that mountain now. But pretty soon, Mao is coming down from the mountain. And Mao is going to be 10 times stronger. 10 times stronger when he comes down from that mountain. And Mao is going to become the Robin Hood of China. And there's going to be best-selling books in the United States. Red Star Over China by Edgar Snow. The Chinese Red Army Marches by Agnes Smedley. There are going to be people on every corner of the planet who think Mao is the most badass motherfucker they've ever met. There are going to be people singing songs in support of Mao in New York City. They are going to be singing songs in support of Mao in Berlin. They are going to be singing songs in support of Mao in Britain. They are going to be singing songs in support of Mao in Africa. In every corner of the world, they're going to be cheering for the Red Army. And when Japan invades, Chiang Kai-shek is going to say, oh, Let's let Mao be taken care of, right? Let's let the Japanese take care of our little communism problem. We're not going to fight the communists. And so Chiang Kai-shek's generals are going to kidnap Chiang Kai-shek and fly him to an island and force him at the barrel of a gun to sign a treaty with Mao, a joint treaty to fight the Japanese imperialists. And that People's Liberation Army is going to become so legendary. The 8th Route Army, led by Mao Zedong, is going to become so legendary that there's going to be a Hollywood movie based on the Chinese 8th Route Army. It's going to be called Gung Ho, and it's going to be a whole Hollywood movie about how Mao has built a peasant army to fight the Japanese invaders. And Americans are going to love this movie so much that the phrase gung ho is going to become a big part of American slang. If someone's very passionate, they're going to say, he's real gung ho, gung ho. And what is gung ho? It's an anglicized interpretation of the slogan of the Chinese Communist Party, right? All together, all for one, gung ho, gung ho. As Americans are fighting the Japanese, they're going to be chanting gung ho. As American troops are fighting the Nazis in Europe, they're going to be chanting gung ho. Everyone is going to be cheering for the Chinese Communist Party. Everyone is going to think that Mao and China and the communists are the most badass motherfuckers ever. People are going to be cheering for them in every corner of the planet. And you're going to look like idiots, Chiang Kai-shek. You're going to look like idiots, Winston Churchill. You're going to look like idiots, KMT, because you teamed up with Hitler to fight him. You're going to look like idiots. But then, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. After the Second World War is over, after the Japanese Red Army after the Japanese invaders are driven out, after the Red Army is the heroes of the world, Chiang Kai-shek is going to be stupid enough to not let the Chinese communists participate in the election. Chiang Kai-shek is going to be so stupid that he tries to tell the Chinese communists that they have to dissolve their army and hand over their weapons. Chiang Kai-shek is going to be so stupid that pretty soon his own soldiers are going to desert, and pretty soon his own army will be joining with Mao's army. And pretty soon, he's going to be running with his tail between his legs to Taiwan. Pretty soon, there's going to be something called the People's Republic of China. And the Chinese Communist Party will become a force that unifies all of China. From Hong Kong to Tibet, the Uyghur regions. Taiwan will be recognized eventually by the United States as being part of China. And all the efforts by the colonizers and the imperialists to try and tear apart this great nation, all the efforts to divide and conquer, to keep a great nation poor, will have failed. And 1/4 of humanity, China, will stand up. If you ever want any solid proof that A does not equal A, and that you never step into the same river twice, I would urge you to think about how Mao came down from the mountain and how history has changed. But there are other examples. There are other examples we can think about. There are many other examples we can think of in history. One example that I often will point to is the horrendous situation called McCarthyism. I don't know if folks know about McCarthyism, but McCarthyism was awful. People think McCarthyism was some Hollywood actors. People think McCarthyism was some censorship. No. I know people who lived through the McCarthy period, and they will tell you how bad things were. During the McCarthy period, they passed a law in 1951 called the McCarran Internal Security Act. And that law enabled the U.S. government to create a list of 2 million people who would be put into concentration camps if they declared a national emergency. There was actually a law to put communists in concentration camps. During McCarthyism, the National Board of the Communist Party were put in prison. And what did they put them in prison for? Did they put them in prison for anything they did? No. Did they put them in prison for anything that they said? No. They put them in prison for things that Vladimir Lenin said. They put them in prison for things that Karl Marx said. That's right. The Smith Act made it not just a crime to be a communist, it made it a crime to teach the necessity of the overthrow of the U.S. government or any ideology that might lead one to that conclusion. And William Z. Foster and Gus Hall and Benjamin Davis, post 100 years, Jack Satchel, they got up on the witness stand and they were asked, have you in the Communist Party ever advocated, McCarthy, have you in the Communist Party ever advocated the violent overthrow of the U.S. government? And they said, no, we have not. We have not. You can read our manifestos, you can read our programs. We advocate a peaceful transition to socialism. We have formed the Progressive Party and worked with Henry Wallace, the former vice president, to run for office. We have built labor unions. We've built the Civil Rights Congress to peacefully march for civil rights. We do not, El Salvador, we do not advocate violence. We do not, they said. And the judge said that doesn't really matter because you have been distributing a book called The State and Revolution by Vladimir Lenin, and you've been distributing a book called The Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx, and based on what we've read in our interpretation of The State and Revolution by Vladimir Lenin and our interpretation of the Communist Manifesto, we believe, even though you yourselves are functioning as a legal political party, even though we cannot prove that you have ever done anything illegal, even though we cannot prove that you have gone around advocating illegal things, you are teaching people an ideology that maybe possibly could lead them to come to the conclusion that the U.S. government should be violently overthrown. So on that basis, we are going to send you to federal prison. And what did the Communist Party say in their defense? They said, you're right, we have been distributing documents that might lead people to that conclusion. One of the documents we distributed is called the Declaration of Independence. You read the Declaration of Independence, it clearly states that people have the right to abolish and overthrow their government. Venezuela, USD, Bitcoin. Right. If you read the writings of Thomas Jefferson, he says that the tree of liberty should be watered every 10 or 20 years with the blood of tyrants. So yes, we in the Communist Party, occasionally, we mainly study Marx and Lenin and Stalin and Mao, but occasionally we do have a class where we study the writings of Thomas Jefferson. So would you like to put us in jail for distributing Thomas Jefferson's writings? Would you like to put us in jail for distributing the Declaration of Independence? Would you like to put us in jail for distributing the writings of Abraham Lincoln, where he talks about how we have the right of revolution, the right to overthrow our government? The Lincoln-Douglas debates where he talks about our revolutionary right to overthrow it. Are we guilty? Are you going to put us in jail for distributing the writings of Abraham Lincoln and Washington and Jefferson? Because they are just as violent in their rhetoric. They are just as radical in their rhetoric as Marx and Lenin and Stalin are. Are we going to be put in jail for that? The judge didn't hear it, sent them to federal prison. Folks, it was worse than that. The FBI used to follow people around, make it so that if you were a communist, you couldn't have a job. I knew a woman who was a teacher. She was teaching. One day the FBI came to her school and said, this woman's a communist. She lost her job. She got a job at another school. Again, FBI showed up. This woman's a communist. She lost her job. She ended up working at AT&T, a telephone company. The FBI came there too. The telephone company said, as long as you don't talk about communism on the phone, we don't care what you are. And she worked at the telephone company. That happened. The Rosenbergs, given the death penalty. It's horrendous. Horrendous situation, even though all kinds of international observers said they didn't give the Soviet Union the atomic bomb. They didn't do that. They clearly did not give the Soviet Union the atomic bomb. The Soviet Union developed the atomic bomb themselves. Didn't matter. They electrocuted the Rosenbergs. Things were bad in the 1950s. Things were bad in the 1950s. The Civil Rights Congress, a group that went around fighting for black people in the South, trying to stop the execution of innocent black men, trying to demand the right of people to drink from the same drinking fountains, boycotting Sears because Sears had a policy of banning black people from its stores in the South, protesting and picketing Sears. The Civil Rights Congress was singled out by the U.S. Department of Justice and declared to be a communist subversive organization. They even passed a special rule that if somebody was arrested, the Civil Rights Congress was not allowed to post bail for them. They would not accept bail from the Civil Rights Congress because it was considered to be a communist front organization. And they went after gay people. They went after gay people. The LGBT community was viciously targeted. Joe McCarthy made homophobic jokes on the floor of Congress. They passed a law that said that no gay person could work for the U.S. State Department. Why? Because everybody knows that all gay people are communists. Did you know that? I didn't know that, but apparently all gay people are communists. And also, if one was gay, the commies might be able to blackmail you to get you what you wanted to do. So the U.S. government had a policy, thanks to McCarthyism, that no gay person could get a government job. To be a teacher in a number of states, you had to swear that you were not a member of the Communist Party. It was pretty intense, pretty intense. Public employees forced to take insane oaths. It was pretty awful stuff. Pretty awful stuff. McCarthyism. Rico. It was pretty awful stuff. But I wish I could go back in time. I wish that I could go back in time and say to those witch hunters, those right-wingers, those anti-communists, those McCarthyists, those social democrats and Trotskyites who cooperated with McCarthyism, wish I could say to them, enjoy yourselves. Enjoy yourselves. Have your fun while it lasts. Because pretty soon, Joe McCarthy is going to be drinking himself to death. And he's going to be exposed as a liar and a fraud on national television. And pretty soon, that issue the communists are always talking about, civil rights, pretty soon there are going to be civil rights demonstrations going on all over the country. There's going to be a man named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who is leading marches of hundreds of thousands of people on Washington demanding civil rights, the thing that the communists had been supporting. There is going to be Robert F. Williams, an African-American leader of the NAACP who's going to take up guns to fight the Ku Klux Klan. And when the government tries to arrest him for it, he's going to flee to China, and he's going to flee to Cuba, and he's going to broadcast revolutionary black propaganda from Cuba, Radio Free Dixie, into the United States. There's going to be something called the Black Panther Party that's going to be formed. And when you try to go have a war with Vietnam, there's going to be young people who light their draft cards on fire. There are going to be young people running through the streets of New York City and Washington, D.C., and California and San Francisco with the flag of the Vietnamese National Liberation Front. There are going to be people all over the streets of this country chanting, "Ho, ho, Ho Chi Minh, the NLF is going to win." There are going to be people running through the streets chanting, "One side's right, one side's wrong, victory to the Viet Cong." There are going to be American soldiers shooting their officers when they're ordered to massacre innocent civilians. There's going to be a U.S. Army falling apart. There is going to be a whole planet cheering for the National Liberation Front of Vietnam. There is going to be a whole planet supporting and admiring the Black Panthers. Gaddafi is going to come to power in Libya. There is going to be an explosion of revolutionary anti-imperialist ferment even in the United States of America. So enjoy yourselves. Enjoy yourselves. Have fun while it lasts. Have your fun. Enjoy yourselves. Have a good time. Enjoy yourselves. Enjoy your witch hunts. Enjoy your McCarthyism. Enjoy your execution of the Rosenbergs and your frame-ups. Enjoy your FBI repression of progressive activists. But I've got a feeling that your little party is not going to last very long. Because A does not equal A. You never step into the same river twice. And Mao is coming down from the mountain. And Joe McCarthy is going to drink himself to death because the world is constantly in a state of change. I don't know. Nicaragua migration, and there's one before that. Urban in Hungary. Coup. Indeed. Indeed. Folks, the world is constantly in a state of change. Things are not the same as they were before. When the Soviet Union fell, our click rush to judgment. When the Soviet Union fell, they told us that communism was over. They said, "Oh, communism is over. This is the end of history." They even had a book called The End of History. Generational wealth. Communist society. They told us that's the last you're ever going to hear of communism. The Soviet Union is gone. China is having free market reforms. Vietnam is having market reforms. Cuba and North Korea are still doing their thing, but that's it. Communism's over. There's not going to be any communism. They went into the former USSR and they wrecked the place economically. They privatized everything, shock therapy economics, selling the country off to the highest bidder. And in Latin America, they had an economic wrecking ball. They demolished the country after country. Bolivia, Venezuela, Chile, Argentina, they just demolished countries with neoliberalism, shock therapy economics. Shock therapy economics. And they said, that communism problem, we're never going to have to deal with that ever again. Only a matter of time before China becomes a capitalist country. Only a matter of time before Vietnam becomes a capitalist country. Soviet Union is long gone. In Latin America, all the communist groups, Communist Party, Cuba is isolated. That's the end of that. No more communism. No more communism. Never again. It's all done. It's all done. The Cold War is over. The United States is the only superpower. And that means we can pass the North American Free Trade Agreement and ship jobs to Mexico and demolish Mexico's agricultural sector and wreck Haiti and drive Haiti into poverty. And that means we can create this group called the World Trade Organization. And then we can overrule laws. If a country passes a labor law to protect its workers, why, we can take them to the World Trade Organization and punish them for it, right? We can tear down borders. In fact, we can even set up an international criminal court, and we can drag African leaders and leaders of former Yugoslavia to this international criminal court and indict them. We can set up one global capitalist system, and nobody can get in our way. There's nobody to stand against us. But I really wish, I really wish I was alive at the time, but I was too young to know any better. I really wish I could go to Milton Friedman and Alan Greenspan and Bill Clinton and Bill Browder and George Soros and say, enjoy yourselves. Enjoy yourselves, neoliberals. Enjoy yourselves, libertarianism. Libertarians, wrote it down. Enjoy yourselves, libertarians. Enjoy yourselves, free marketeers. Enjoy yourselves, capitalists. I've got a feeling you're not going to be too happy when somebody named Hugo Chavez gets elected in Venezuela. You try to overthrow him with a coup, but you just can't do it because he's too darn popular with the rank and file soldiers. And then pretty soon, there's going to be a leader called Evo Morales in Bolivia. And pretty soon, the Sandinistas are going to be back in Nicaragua. And pretty soon, there's going to be a new bank created called the Bolivarian Alternative of Latin America. Oh, and you're not going to be too thrilled when somebody named Vladimir Putin gets elected in Russia. And suddenly, Russia's oil and gas is back under the control of the public. And suddenly, Russia is back in business. And Russians are no longer starving. And they're suddenly rebuilding Russia economically. And Russia is doing business with Venezuela and Nicaragua and Cuba and Vietnam. Oh, and hold tight, because I know you said you thought that China was just going to go back to capitalism. Let me tell you about a guy named Xi Jinping. Yeah, there's going to be a guy named Xi Jinping who comes along, and I think he's going to put a little bit of a monkey wrench in your plans there. I think Xi Jinping is going to come along, and pretty soon there's going to be pictures of Mao everywhere in China. Pretty soon they're going to be studying the Chinese Communist Party and the Marxist-Leninist ideology. Pretty soon they are going to have a mass line campaign and root out all the corrupt officials. You know, all those officials that you bribed in the party to let corporations do whatever they want, all those corrupt officials that you handed money to, all those fake communists who whittled their way into positions of power in China. Well, President Xi Jinping is going to pull them out of there. He's going to pull them out of there. He is going to get rid of them. He is going to crack down on corruption. And pretty soon there's going to be something called the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative. And while America and American imperialism and capitalism goes to developing countries and drives them into poverty and makes people poverty, every country around the world is going to want to start doing business with China, because China's building hospitals and schools and railroads and highways and power plants, while America is bombing and destroying and impoverishing people. And pretty soon, that China that you said, oh, they're going to be capitalist pretty soon, just give it time, that China is going to be surging forward, and there's going to be nothing you can do about it. Why? Because Joe McCarthy drank himself to death. Because Mao is coming down from the mountain. Because A does not equal A, and you never step into the same river twice. You better believe it, folks. You better believe it. Books on dialectical materialism. And folks, EFF, South Africa. China haunts imperialism. Folks, I can apply this understanding to my own life. Folks, when I got out of college in Cleveland, those were not good years. The U.S. economy had crashed. We were in a financial crisis. I was out of college, Cleveland, economically not in a good situation. Not in a good situation. And I worked at many gas stations. I am not a very good gas station employee. I'll tell you that much. I don't know what it was. Maybe I would be better at it now, but attention to little details has never been my strong suit. And I kept getting fired from gas station jobs. And you know, I used to actually go and sell my blood plasma. I don't know if anyone's ever done that. You're not selling your blood because they pump the other stuff back into you. They take your blood out of your veins and they separate the plasma of your blood from the other part of your blood, and then they shoot the other part of your blood back into you. And it's quite cold when it goes back into you. They shoot your cold blood back. I didn't miss it, Space Communist. I saw it. I wrote it down. I'll talk about Hassan. They shoot your cold blood back into you. Yeah, that's what I used to do. And I'll never forget the day when I was in line to sell my blood plasma. You could do it 2 times a week. And so this was my second time. It was a Friday. Fridays at the Blood Plasma Center were always packed. They were always packed because people wanted some extra money for the weekend. And, you know, people say, oh, it's just drug addicts who sell their blood. Bullshit. I saw mothers there with their kids. They would take turns watching each other's. Sorry, it's just hard for me to talk about these things. I saw mothers watching each other's kids while they went in and sold their blood plasma. I saw college students, saw senior citizens, people who'd worked their whole lives getting by on Social Security, didn't have enough, and they would sell their blood plasma. Like I said, there was always a big line on Fridays. Always a big line on Fridays because people wanted to have money for the weekend. And I will never forget, one Friday, I went into the Blood Plasma Center. I was going to sell my blood. I was going to sell my blood at the Blood Plasma Center. And I will remember I got there at about 11, and I'm in the line. The whole place is packed full of people. I mean, it's just packed full of people. And, you know, it's white people, black people, Asian folks, Latinos. We're all packed in there. There's people outside. So I'm sitting there with my number. Other people are in there. They're calling people in. Suddenly, you know, the people who work there all wear white coats as if they're medical professionals or something. They ain't. You know, it's just a technician thing. You know, it's like, you know, they're wearing white coats like you want them to think they're a doctor. Suddenly, around 2 o'clock, I've been there since 11. There's people that have been there since early in the morning, and it's been 11. You know, this woman in a white coat walks in. She's got 2 police officers next to her. Never forget this. got two police officers next to her as she's walking to the front of the room. The two cops are there, holding their guns, kind of. The woman's there. Two cops standing next to her, kind of eyeing everybody, holding their guns. And the woman there in her white coat, she says, Folks, I'm really sorry. I have to make this announcement, okay? It's not my fault. Folks, it's not my fault, but I have to make this announcement. It is not my fault, okay? So don't get mad at me. It's not my fault. But, folks, the freezer where we put everyone's blood has broken, okay? So we can't buy any more blood from anyone today. So everyone's just got to leave. We're going to have to lock the door. So it's not my fault. I know you're getting mad, but it's not my fault. And everybody in the room is just like, what? We've been here for hours. What are you doing? I mean, everyone in the room is furious. And the cops are like, keep it down. And everybody in the room is just furious. There's about to be a riot in that place. And this woman, she said, I've been here all day watching my kids and watching other people's kids. She's like, how can you do this? Can't you just compensate us for our time? And she's like, ma'am, we don't buy people's time here at the plasma center. We buy your blood plasmas. We don't buy time. This isn't a job, okay? We don't buy people's time. We buy blood plasma. That's what we do here. So no, we cannot do that. Oh, people were ready to riot. People were furious. There that day at the blood plasma center. And it was lucky they had 2 or 3 cops standing there next to the woman, because there could have been a riot. I will never forget that day. I would never forget that day. That was a wild day. The freezer broke, don't know why. And all kinds of people, including myself, who'd been waiting to sell our blood, we were, I don't know, SOL, as they say. And that was a pretty wild day. And it's funny because actually, that area that I was in, the west side of Cleveland, where they had the plasma center where I used to sell my blood, that area used to be a very prosperous place. That used to be a center of the steel industry. Right? There used to be, the steel yards in Cleveland down by the river used to be a place for deeply prosperous employment. Steel workers at 1950s, 1960s, steel workers were some of the best paid industrial workers. And, they got rid of the steel industry. The steel industry of Cleveland shut down. What they did, though, is that in Cleveland, and I think they still have this, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I've been there. But in the area that used to be where all the steel mills were, the city of Cleveland actually paid for this fancy bus line and paved an area, and they put up a Walmart and a Sam's Club and a number of big box stores where workers are paid very, very low wages, and they don't have any union representation. And the place that they called it, this service sector place that they erected in Cleveland, they called it Steel Yards Common. That's what I think it's still called that. Steel Yards Common. All right, in memory of the prosperous, good-paying steel jobs that were once there, we have Steel Yards Common. Think about it, right? This used to be a prosperous area I was in, and now it was an area where people were desperate and struggling. That's capitalism, and that's the trajectory of the capitalist system in our time. And that's what's happening. The United States is in an overall state of decay. When I think about my life, when I was selling my blood plasma in Cleveland, I think about how pretty soon I was in New York City. Pretty soon I was traveling around the world. And if you had told me at that moment that I would be where I am today. I'd be talking to you from the 21st floor of a fancy skyscraper in New York City. That I'd be setting up a Marxist think tank to spread the revolutionary message to people. That I'd have a book that was the top new release on Amazon in the category of anarchism. This is the #1 new release in the category of anarchism on Amazon. If you told me that I would have gone to Russia and gone to Iran and gone to Venezuela and gone to Brazil, if you'd have told me that we were on the verge of building a new think tank to spread socialism, that I'd be on here broadcasting to thousands of people talking about revolutionary ideology, you had told me all of that, I knew A does not equal A. I knew that you never step into the same river twice. I knew that Mao came down from the mountain. I knew that Joe McCarthy drank himself to death, but I still might have had a hard time believing you because those were hard times. Those were hard times. But it's important to keep all of that in mind. It's important to keep all of that in mind. It's important to keep all of that in mind. And it's interesting because some people have asked me, why did you write this book, Caleb? Why did you write this book? Why in the world did you write a book about BreadTube, right? You got Jabba the Bosch on there. Caleb is a Nazi. You got Skippy the Bear, he's got his suicide porn channel. Why in the world would you do this? Why do this? Well, the reason I did this is for the simple reason that more people listen to the BreadTubers. More people listen to the BreadTubers than listen to the Workers' World Party or the Communist Party or the Socialist Workers' Party or the Socialist Party or the Spartacist League or the League for the Revolutionary Party or think about it. I mean, we got an alphabet soup of communist parties. We got the RCP and the ISO and the QWH and the XYZ. And we got a lot of leagues, and we got a lot of committees, and we got about 5 different Fourth Internationals. We got a 5th International. More people listen to BreadTube than listen to any of those people. I'm just being real with you. More people listen to BreadTube than listen to any of those people. All right? There are a lot of different people calling themselves communists and all of that, but far more people listen to ContraPoints and Socialism Done Left, and Jabba the Bosch, and they do. And H. Bomber Guy Brewis. More people listen to them. And so, if nobody comes along and points out where these people are wrong, and points out how their ideology is fake socialism that serves imperialism, and points out how these people are serving the ultra-rich imperialists, and points out that what these people are preaching, and especially the vicious hatred they preach for real socialists and real communists, and the hatred for China, and the hatred for Cuba, and the hatred for Venezuela these people preach, right? If nobody comes along, then all the people who are listening to them will never have been challenged. There is not a single other book on Amazon with the word BreadTube in the title. This is the only book on Amazon that has BreadTube in the title. And there is not a single other book with the complete, the single word BreadTube in the title. Now, is that because what am I trying to say there? Am I trying to say, Caleb is so amazing, no one has ever done what he has done. I am a legend in my own mind, be in awe of me. No, that is not what I am saying. What I'm saying is, communists, get your shit together. More people are listening to them than listening to that. Maybe instead of writing a book about the Spartacist League, maybe instead of writing a book about the CPUSA, maybe instead of writing a book about Bob Avakian, maybe, just maybe, it's time to write a book about BreadTube. Because there are some serious contenders out there. People are ready to hear what we have to say. There's an audience for BreadTube. There's an audience for them. People want to hear socialist and leftist ideas, so the ruling class is, dishing out some fake socialism to try and control and manipulate people who are interested in all the stuff we talk about. People are ready to hear this. I've been beating the drum out of the movement to the masses. Out of the movement to the masses. I have been beating that drum for so long. I've been beating that drum for so long because it's true. Average middle Americans have had their homes foreclosed. They've seen their kids go to jail. They've seen, lives destroyed with opioids. They're facing a lifetime of low-wage, short-term service sector jobs. They're watching a brutal police state unfold. They're more anti-racist than ever before, and they are ready to fight back. They're ready to fight back. Average working class Americans are ready to fight back. They are ready to fight back. Average working class Americans are tired of what the big banks and big corporations and big monopolies and warmongers have done to their country. They are tired. They are tired of what the international bankers and Wall Street monopolists and hustlers and money sharks, what the oil cartels, what the weapons manufacturers and the military-industrial complex, they are tired of what Wall Street imperialism has done to their homeland. And what they need to understand is that the same thing that is being done to the United States right now, jobs destroyed, living standards driven down, drugs, imperialist wars, this is what the imperialists have been doing to Africa for 100 years. And this is what the imperialists have been doing to Asia for 100 years. This is what the imperialists have been doing to South America for 100 years. This is what imperialism is. Capitalism is not, the pencil factory is not there because the guy owns the pencil factory and there's people who work in the pencil factory. No. 21st century capitalism is imperialism. It is a system of global monopolies where big banks and corporations in the Western countries carve out the world as a sphere of influence and hold back economic development, keeping the world poor so that Wall Street and London can stay rich. Capitalism in our time is imperialism. And no, that is not anti-Semitic to talk about that. We're not talking about Jews or Muslims or Christians or any group. We're talking about an economic system. We're talking about what Lenin wrote about in his book, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. And the fact that BreadTube wants to tell you that you're not allowed to talk about imperialism because somehow they think imperialism is anti-Semitic shows you exactly who they work for. It shows you exactly what they're all about. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't talk about imperialism. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't question what they're saying about China. Don't let anybody tell you that you're not allowed to question the lies that pave the way for the next war. Do not let anyone tell you that. Scream against imperialism until the day you die. Expose the lies of American mainstream media. We ain't going to take it anymore. We ain't going to take it anymore. We are fighting back. Imperialism is doomed, and we are the ones to finish it off. Don't get me started about it. And that labor aristocracy that held imperialism together for so long, that aristocracy of labor, that held the imperialist system together for so long, that cushy middle class, that bribe they gave American workers to support their wars and to support empire and to support racism and police brutality, that bribe is gone. That bribe is gone. They have gotten rid of the aristocracy of labor. They don't need it anymore. They don't need a layer of good paid workers in their steel mills anymore. They don't need a layer of good paid workers in their auto plants anymore. That bribe, that labor aristocracy bribe is gone. And now is the moment when the American working class can stand arm in arm in solidarity with the people of Vietnam and the people of China and the people of South America and the people of Africa and the people of Asia. Now is the time. The potential, the revolutionary potential for what we have to offer is here. Our moment is now. Our moment is now. But you know what, folks? Hate to break it to you. Hate to break it to you. I wish I could get on here and tell you that it's going to be so easy. I wish I could get on here and say, it's going to be easy. It's going to be easy. It's going to be a cakewalk. It's going to be easy, right? We're going to just go out to the Americans and tell them that socialism is the answer. And they're going to say, wow, I never thought of that. Let's have socialism. And we'll just peacefully, happily walk into socialism. And it'll be fun and it'll be easy. I wish I could tell you that. I wish I could tell you that. But I'm not a grifter. If I was a grifter, I would tell you what you want to hear. That's how you can spot a grifter. A grifter is somebody who tells you what they think you want to hear. I'm not a grifter. I am not a grifter. I will tell you things that will make you uncomfortable. I will bring you bad news sometimes that you do not want to hear. I will do it. I will tell you things that are unpleasant. I will make you aware of truths that you do not want to be aware of. I will do that. I will. You can count on me to do that. Go back and listen to some Malcolm X speeches, right? Malcolm X was not a grifter. And many of Malcolm X's speeches contain phrases like, I know you don't want to hear this, but look it up. Because Malcolm X was not a grifter. And if I got on here and said, well, it's very easy. Oh boy, it's going to be happy fun. It'll be a nice night. If I got on here and told you that, I would be grifting. But I'm not grifting. I'm telling you the truths that may be uncomfortable for you to hear. And the truths are that it's always darkest before dawn. It's always darkest before dawn. We're going to have to ride out the storm. Our day is coming. Our day is here. People are ready for this. Our day is here. But it's going to get hard. It's going to get tough. The final section of this book, before the appendices started, I quoted from Lenin. This is a quote from Vladimir Lenin, from his essay, Imperialism and the Split in Socialism. This is what he wrote. This is him writing 1916. He's talking about against the social imperialists and the social democrats who sold out the war and supported World War I. They said, neither we nor anyone else can calculate precisely what portion of the proletariat is following and will follow the social chauvinists and opportunists. This will be revealed only by the struggle, and it will be definitely decided only by the socialist revolution. And it is therefore our duty, if we wish to remain socialists, to go down lower and deeper to the real masses. This is the whole meaning and the whole purport of the struggle against opportunism. By exposing the fact that the opportunists and social chauvinists are in reality betraying and selling the interests of the masses, that they are defending the temporary privileges of a minority of workers, that they are the vehicles of bourgeois ideas and influences, that they are really allies and agents of the bourgeoisie, we teach the masses to appreciate their true political interests, to fight for socialism and for the revolution, through all of the long and painful vicissitudes of imperialist war and imperialist armistices. Let me repeat that last part, in case you didn't get it. By exposing the fact that opportunists and social chauvinists are in reality betraying and selling the interests of the masses, that they are defending the temporary privileges of a minority of workers, that they are vehicles of bourgeois ideas and influences, that they are allies and agents of the bourgeoisie, we teach the masses to appreciate their true political and painful vicissitudes of imperialist wars and imperialist armistices. Folks, exposing people like BreadTube is not just a fun thing to do. It is our responsibility. It's our responsibility as socialists. We need to expose them. That is how we teach the masses to appreciate their true interests. But it's going to get hard. It's going to get difficult. There are people lying about me right now. I expected this. There is one of these clowns has said on his streams, I kid you not, that there is, quote, not a single citation in my new book, right? Not a single citation. Well, maybe he should check out page 1. It's actually page 2. The first page of the book, there is a citation. Cornelius Cardew, Lords of Labor. And then maybe they should check out the section where I cite the CIA World Fact Book. And maybe they should check out the section where I cite dramareport.com. And maybe they should talk about the section where I cite Vice magazine. And maybe they should talk about the section where I cite Marx, or I cite Lenin, or I cite Malthus, or I cite Steve Hassan, or I cite all kinds of people. And in fact, there is a bibliography in my book that starts on page 191 and goes on for pages. But he says there's not a single citation in the book. Okie dokie. Well, I guess there's not. I mean, that's what he said. I mean, and he can't be wrong. I mean, it's not like, pro-imperialist people ever lie. I mean, it kind of reminds me. I did a refutation of a PragerU video a while back. There's a PragerU video called Who Was Karl Marx? And in that PragerU video, this professor says, there's no data. There's no data in the book Capital by Karl Marx. There's lots of data in the book Capital by Karl Marx. Karl Marx spent all of his money practically going to the British Museum and asking, for data to compile the book. But hey, he said it, right? I mean, I believe it was Joseph Stalin who famously said that paper is an amazing substance because it can withstand having even the most blatant falsehoods written upon it. And I guess YouTube is an amazing app because it can withstand having the most bold-faced bullshit lies told upon it. But we should expect this. And they've come for me before, and they're going to keep coming for me. They've started up about Dugin again. I must be a fascist because I talked to Dugin. Well, Dugin's not a fascist. He rejects both communism and fascism. He's a traditionalist conservative. And I'm not Dugin. But no. You talk to somebody who we think is a fascist, so therefore you're no. Right? And, there's other stuff. I mean, we'll see what they come up with. I'm always impressed. I mean, first my father was a Wall Street banker. I don't know. My father was a Wall Street banker. That was one we heard. I think there was a guy who said I was into lift and carry. I didn't even know what lift and carry was, but apparently there was this guy posting porn videos saying that I had a sexual kink for carrying women on my back. That's a new one. I never heard that one before, but I was into lift and carry, and he had all these porn videos. They're coming for me, right? Get ready for it. They're coming for me. They're coming for me. They're coming for me. And what is amazing about these people is that they've drawn heavily from Hitler, right? In Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler talks about the concept of the big lie. You can look this up, the big lie. The big lie. And what's the big lie? Well, basically, Hitler is telling people that if you want to lie to people, don't tell a little lie. You got to tell a big lie. Because people will believe that other people are capable of little lies. We all tell little white lies here and there in our life. When you tell a big lie, and it's just so damn big, it's just so astronomically big, it is such a big lie. If you tell a big lie, people just have a hard time believing it. Right? I mean, the implications, if someone tells a lie that is that big, is that, you can forgive somebody for telling a little lie. You can't forgive somebody for telling a very big lie. Right? And Vosh is on his streams Not saying that I did something he disagrees with, not saying I'm wrong, telling his viewers that I am a literal Nazi, that I am literally a member of a Nazi group, that I am a literal Nazi. Those are his words. That's a big lie. And the thing is, that's such a big lie that his fans either have to believe it or believe he's evil, right? Think about it. That's all they can do. Because if someone is going to tell a lie that is that big, I mean, that level of character assassination, saying that I am actually a Nazi, right? Then he's clearly an evil person. That is clearly not acceptable behavior. That's not a little white lie. When you claim that someone is actually a literal Nazi, that is pretty awful behavior. So all of his fans have to sit there and go, oh, okay, do I want to end my relationship with Vosh, or do I just want to believe him? That's what they have to do. That's where they're at. And that's the power of the big lie, right? What have we all heard our whole life? Communism never worked anywhere. Well, it clearly has. China, space travel, cell phones, AK-47 rifles. Geez, how did Russia and China industrialize? Oh, geez, why does Cuba have the best healthcare system? It's clearly a big lie. But why do they get away with it? Because it's a big lie. It's a big lie. And people are, when you tell a big lie, it puts people in a position where they just accept it. Because if you say that communism didn't fail everywhere it's ever been tried, that means the government of the United States are the most vicious, deceptive liars out there. That means that our entire educational system in the United States is deceptive propaganda. That means that American mainstream media cannot be trusted on anything. If they are going to tell a lie that big, that communism never, anywhere, had any success, ever, and it's clearly false, then you can't believe anything they say. And that's a pill that is tough to swallow. And that's the power of the big lie. When you give people a pill that is too big to swallow, they won't swallow it. And that's the power of the big lie, right? And that's why these people use the big lie. That's why they use Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels' tactic of the big lie. Because people don't want to swallow that pill. It's too much for people to digest, right? That Vosh is a satanic, evil liar who goes around claiming that I'm actually a white supremacist when I'm married to a woman who's not white, who goes around telling his followers that I'm a white supremacist when I went to court with police brutality victims, where you can read articles about my anti-police brutality activism. You know, if I'm not a literal Nazi, Vosh is a satanic liar. And that is too much for his followers to swallow. So he lies big, right? He's basically giving them an ultimatum. Me or truth. Me or truth. And it works. It works, right? Just like the American educational system. Just like American media. Communism's never worked anywhere. And again, if that's true, you know, you're basically giving everyone an ultimatum. You want to remain at peace with American society, American media, American schools, American, government, American universities. If you want to be at peace with it, you got to deny you got to just accept the big lie, because that's not a little lie. This is the power of the big lie. I think this is the power of the big lie, right? As you give people that kind of ultimatum. A big lie forces people to choose. And choosing can be difficult sometimes. Choosing can be difficult. Can be. And there may be a time where I'm talking to you, the person watching this, there probably will be a time where you are going to have to make a choice. You're going to have to make a choice. Am I going to stand for truth? Or am I going to go along with the crowd? You're going to have to make a choice. And that will come along. You'll be tested. We are all going to be tested. I've been tested in my life, trust me. And you're going to be tested. Things are good right now. I'm very happy. We just had an amazing Center for Political Innovation retreat. The book is selling like crazy, like hotcakes. My social media is exploding right now. I'm happy. Things are good, and that's good. It's good that things are good. We should allow ourselves to enjoy the good times. At the same time, be aware that things are not always so easy. Things are not always so easy. And there will come a time where we may be tested. And I actually want to read to you the words of a great communist, not a Marxist, certainly not a Marxist, not a scientific socialist, but a great communist who lived about 2,000 years ago. And his name is Jesus Christ. I'm going to read to you what Jesus Christ told his followers. This is what Jesus Christ, the communist revolutionary who was persecuted by the Roman Empire, who drove the money changers out of the temple, who said that the last shall be first and the first shall be last, the great revolutionary martyr who sacrificed his life for what he believed in, who became immortal in death. I'm going to read to you what Jesus Christ told his followers. And then that will be the end of my opening remarks. This is what Jesus Christ told his followers. Think not that I come to send peace to the earth, because I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's foes shall be they of his own household. And he that loveth his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. And he that finds his life shall lose it. And he that loses his life for my sake shall find it. And he that receiveth you receiveth me. And he that receiveth me receiveth him that sent me. And he that receiveth a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward. And he that receiveth a righteous man in the name of a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. And whosoever shall give drink unto one of these little ones a cup of cold water, only in the name of a disciple, verily I say unto you, he shall in no wise lose his reward. And that concludes my opening message for today. Thank you, folks. Family is the ultimate source of self-alienation. Family. Self-alienation. All right, folks, names and locations. Names and locations. I shall call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. And then from there, I answer your super chats, and then we're done for tonight. Names and locations. Names in Chaya in Montreal. Ryan in Oakland. Arturo in Anchorage, Alaska. Who else is with us tonight? Who else is with us? Leipzig, East Germany. California. Brazil. Raphael. Dylan in California. Serbia. Lexington, Massachusetts. Clydebank. Hawaii. Wisconsin. Langley Valley. Max the Sax, welcome. Australia. Lexington. Texas. Cambridge. Nashville. JT24, Mississippi. Holly in Queens, New York. Meredith and Quinn just ordered your new book. Great. Glad. Cleveland Pirate Alex. Texas. Riviera, Andre, thank you, Andre, for your super chats, and thank you for being here. Space Communist, Corona, California, Tasmania, Alabama from London, Marty in Illinois, Peter in Poland, French, Finland, Rote Front, Jason in Switzerland, Corruption Nation, Sydney, Australia, Elwood City, Balthazar in Oakland, Tucson, Jeremy Chase in Nid, Oklahoma, Kim from Jersey City, New Jersey, Ghani, Texas, Vinicius in Brazil, Vallejo, California, Jason Sarna, good friend of the program, Greater Adelaide, Australia, Richie in Staten Island, Ukiah, California, Glendale, California, French, Zephyr from Eugene, Oregon, Patrick in Los Angeles, Daniel in Seattle, Neobim in Toronto, Helen in Melbourne. Hi, Caleb. Well, shout out to you, Helen. You're a great friend of everything we do here. Good luck with your leaflets, by the way. Singapore, Southeast Asia, Southwest Michigan, Denver, Colorado, Ben Kavanaugh of the Workers' Party in Edinburgh, and I think you're going to be a moderator, Ben. You are now a moderator. Welcome, Ben. Chris in Salt Lake City. Welcome, Chris. Jason, communist in Manchester, New Hampshire. Welcome, Chris. Miami, Florida. Calgary, Canada. West Virginia. Helsinki, Finland. Tennessee. Gainesville, Florida. Pasadena, California. Copy of your book just arrived today. Looking forward to the read. Well, I hope you enjoy it. Juan from Mexico, hello. Joey from Elwood City. Donald Shantz, welcome. Good friend of the program. Right here, says Richard. Jeff in Studio City. Fairhope, Alabama. Oklahoma, New Jersey. Oakland, New Jersey. Glendale, California. Wilmington, Delaware. Fred from Alameda. Victoria. Tampa, Florida. Robert Webb says we need a government of action to fight for working families. Martin is in Ireland. Orange Duke. Thanks, Caleb. Love the book. Hi, I'm Jason. I think you can be a mod as well, Jason. Welcome. Arkansas, Pomona, California. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, 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 welcome. Anybody else, names and locations? Anybody else? Anybody else? Names and locations. Anybody else? All right, so now we have children's books. Children's books. All right, so I was asked about communist children's books. Well, they did have a lot of communist children's books in socialist countries. And in fact, one of the neat things, I used to work at a bookstore years ago. I volunteered at a bookstore in Cleveland, a communist bookstore, and they had some children's books from China that had been published during the Cultural Revolution. They were neat little children's books that were pushing Chairman Mao's revolutionary line. There were Soviet children's books, Dr. Seuss, right? We know that there are some of his cartoons that are deeply problematic. We don't want to promote them, but Dr. Seuss, he wrote some of his books with a left-wing message. For example, Horton Hears a Who was dedicated to the Spanish Republic. He intended that to be an analogy for the Spanish Republic. Dr. Seuss was not a member of the Communist Party, but a friend of the Communist Party. And he wrote some pro-Stalin cartoons during the Second World War. So, I don't like his Lorax book. It's anti-growth, it's eco-Malthusian. But Yertle the Turtle, as Chaya is pointing out, is pretty left-wing. So Dr. Seuss, I think that's a progressive individual. And actually, there's a writer, I guess a children's writer that you could talk about from the 1970s. And she wasn't a communist, but she was a feminist. And she was really groundbreaking. She really changed children and young adult literature. Really, really dynamic. And that was Judy Blume. You can look up Judy Blume. Judy Blume, I believe she was from New York City. And she wrote Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. She wrote Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which was a book about a girl trying to figure out her religious faith and kind of being a Unitarian or an atheist as she's struggling with her, with becoming an adolescent. She wrote a number of books that were deeply controversial, that were feminist books during the 1970s and 80s, I think, too. And she was extremely controversial, and they're very progressive books, and she deals with some pretty tough topics that were not in children's books. I think she deals with homosexuality. In one book, there's an LGBT character. She deals with the question of women's oppression. It's some pretty left-wing, cutting-edge stuff. If you read Judy Blume, and I guess I would call that more young adult. But these books were not for adults; they were for teenagers more, and they were banned. I think she was the most banned writer in the United States. During the 1980s, they started having book burnings when the religious right and the neocons were getting going. And I think Judy Blume was one of the main targets because she was pretty left-wing. I mean, she wasn't a communist, I wouldn't say, but Judy Blume, look up Judy Blume, right? I know Dr. Seuss was progressive, and Judy Blume, I see her in a positive light. I'm sure there's some things she wrote that are problematic in our time, right? But she was considered to be very left-wing and cutting edge when she was publishing things. What's interesting is that a lot of children's books are deeply right-wing. A lot of children's books are, and we don't even realize that, right? I think the message is lost on people. Now, in our time, there is a big effort, there was the whole thing about Dr. Seuss and getting rid of one of his books that had an anti-Asian kind of racist cartoon in it, which was the right thing to do. Nothing wrong with getting rid of racist and offensive images. I think that's a good thing. But at the same time, there are a lot of children's books that have very, very, very right-wing messages. And I remember these books from when I was a kid, and, that were just particularly right-wing, just particularly right-wing. And one which is called How the Elephant Got Its Trunk by Rudyard Kipling. And I've told that on other streams. I'm not going to repeat it here. That's an extremely racist and colonialist book, and it's a selection from a book of children's stories that Rudyard Kipling wrote. And that's an extremely right-wing story that's it's an analogy for the aristocracy of labor and settler colonialism. Right? We remember Rudyard Kipling wrote, "Take up the white man's burden, bring forth the best ye breed." Right? And that Rudyard Kipling was a rotten racist and settler colonialist, and a lot of his message was that white people, low-income white workers, could gain their dignity by being settlers and by being soldiers in imperialist armies. Rudyard Kipling was rotten, right? He was a rotten guy. I mean, just a racist, and he was Cecil Rhodes, right? If we must, to prevent a civil war, we must become imperialists, right? That was Rudyard Kipling. Another children's book that was a big hit in the 1930s. And it's still considered one of the most beloved children's books in the United States. It was published in 1933, the year Hitler came to power. And it was written by a woman who lived in Long Island, New York, whose name was Marjorie Flack. And the book is called The Story About Ping. Right? And it's racist. It takes place in China, and all the people in the book that are Chinese are like racist caricatures. But that's not the main problem with the book. I don't want to give it away, and there's like cartoons of it all over YouTube. It's one of the most famous children's books in the United States. But the message of the book, The Story About Ping, is basically if you're being oppressed, if you feel that your life is unfair, don't do anything about it. Because if you do, you'll only make things worse. Learn to submit to oppression. Learn to submit to oppression. That's the message of the book. It's this beloved children's book. And I don't know if people remember this book, but you can look it up. It is really right-wing. And it's basically a message. The message to children is just learn to submit to oppression. If you are being oppressed in your life, just accept it, because if you try to resist your oppression, you try to get free from your oppression, it's only going to make things worse. It's basically Animal Farm. It's a Animal Farm for kids, as if George Orwell's Animal Farm was not childish and stupid enough. They've got The Story About Ping by Marjorie Flack. Those are both deeply right-wing. So that was a good question I got asked there. Very good question. All right. Will I do an audiobook or the BreadTube book? Yeah, I would be open to doing it. I need the time. Time. My goodness. I'm doing lives. I went to the gym earlier today. I've got an article I need to write tonight. And, and then I'm doing another interview this tomorrow afternoon, and I mean, I got like a million things going on. So the idea that I'm just going to sit down and read the BreadTube book out loud, I mean, if I can find the time, I'll do it. But lately I've been swarmed. I thought things would slow down after we had our first Center for Political Innovation meetup, and they have not. They have not. So there you go. All righty. All right, the next super chat question I got was about Paul Cockshott and his theory of labor value. Look, I kind of understand like a caricature of what Paul Cockshott believes, but I respect him. And out of respect for Paul Cockshott, I want to actually know what he believes. I don't want to respond to a caricature of what he's arguing. I actually want to know what his real beliefs are. Right? So I'm not going to respond to that super chat now because that wouldn't be fair, right? People often argue with a caricature of me, and I don't like it. So I'm going to give Paul Cockshott his respect. I'm not going to respond. The mass graves in Canada, absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous, right? I mean, what was done to the Indigenous folks, taking them from their parents, beating their language out of them. This happened in the United States, too. I mean, the Indian schools, they called them, where they would take, at a certain age, they would take Native American children from their parents, give them new names. I mean, it was awful. It was cultural genocide. And the fact that there are mass graves surrounding these Canadian residential schools is particularly horrendous because it means that not only were people having their culture and their language and their traditions wiped out, not only were they being separated from their parents, but on top of that, a lot of them were dying. They weren't being given medical care, and that's absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. And it shows, the United States, again, right? They throw out there, communism killed good million people. And it's like, wow. It's like, how can you wave that hammer and sickle? Don't you know that's the symbol of Stalin's gulags? And it's like, wow, would you say that to everyone who says, oh, Canada, our home and native land? No one shames them for doing that. Why? Well, don't you know that Canada, killed, look at the residential schools, look at the mass graves. That's what you're singing about, right? Look, and I call for a truce, right? I call for a truce. I think that we Americans, we can celebrate Thanksgiving, we can celebrate the 4th of July, as long as we're also allowed to wave the hammer and sickle flag and march around with pictures of Stalin, right? If you're allowed to celebrate the murder of the Native Americans, if you're allowed to celebrate good things about America, but ignore the killing of the Native Americans, ignore the slavery and Jim Crow, and if you can say that on July 4th we're celebrating the good things about America, not the bad. You can say that on Thanksgiving we're celebrating the good things about America, not the genocide of the Native Americans. Then I can say that by waving my hammer and sickle, I'm celebrating the good things about the Soviet Union and not the bad things. I can say that I'm celebrating the good things about China and communism and not the bad things. I call for a truce, right? Right? You say, well, Caleb, you're a big hypocrite. You march around with a hammer and sickle. And then I say, but you, sir, are the hypocrite. You celebrate Thanksgiving and you celebrate July 4th. It is you who are the hypocrite, sir. Well, I think we should call a truce. You can celebrate the 4th of July, and I can be a communist. And we can acknowledge that there are ugly, horrendous things in the history of America and the West, which there are. And I can acknowledge that there are ugly, horrendous things in the history of communism. There are, right? Look, there are a lot of people in gulags who didn't belong there. Okay? Let's be real, right? Socialist countries, Soviet Union did not have anywhere near the level of free speech that we have in the West. Now, why was that? It was because the Soviet Union was surrounded. There's reasons for these things. It's because they didn't have the ability. They were attacked and invaded. But, to be fair, right, I can acknowledge, and this is what I said in my debate with Stefan Molyneux, I can acknowledge the bad things about American history and still eat Thanksgiving dinner as long as I'm allowed to wave my hammer and sickle flag, acknowledge the bad things in the history of communism, but celebrate the good things, right? We need to be real about that, right? Canadians, you're allowed to celebrate, to sing, oh, Canada. You can do that as long as you recognize that what went on at those residential schools and what was done to Indigenous folks and the various times you've collaborated with American imperialism are wrong. You can celebrate the good things about Canada, not the bad. just like I can celebrate the good things about the United States and not the bad. And all communists can celebrate the good things, the many, many, many good things about communism and not the bad, right? You know, why can't we be rational about these things? Why can't we be rational, right? And look, and you'll notice that these people that are always giving us a body count for communism, never, 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 never do they give a body count for capitalism, right? You say, well, didn't Canada, it was a capitalist country, and it, had these residential schools where they killed all these Native Americans. And they say, well, it's not real capitalism. Anyway, all right, Venezuela. Well, right now, Alex Saab, a Venezuelan diplomat, was on his way to Iran to get medicine for Venezuela. His plane refueled in Cape Verde, and U.S. government officials pulled, at the behest of U.S. officials, I should say, wasn't U.S. government officials, but Cape Verde officials pulled him off the plane, and he's being held there, and they want to extradite him to the United States. And that's not right. That shouldn't happen. And they need to free Alex Saab. And I did a great interview. It's linked below, down below. I did a great interview with Nancy Hollander, who was the lawyer of Chelsea Manning. She's the lawyer of several of the Guantanamo Bay detainees. And she is also the lawyer representing Alex Saab. And there you go. The revolutionary punk scene. Well, I am not the guy to ask about punk rock, but I will just tell you what I know, which is not much. So, I'm not claiming here to be a punk rock expert or a punk rock understander. I am neither of those things, but I'll just tell you what I know about punk rock. Right? There were punk rock, it's late 70s, early 80s in Britain. Whataboutism? And, late 70s, early 80s. In Britain, you had the Brixton riots, which were a lot of unemployed British, young men went out and rioted, and there was a lot of unemployment, and there was a rise in some of these white supremacist groups, the British National Party, the National Front, and skinhead groups, but there was also a rise in left-wing sentiment. A lot of young British folks, got interested in left-wing music, and that's where punk rock comes out of. Punk rock kind of emerges from the economic downturn of the late 70s and early 80s in Britain. There was an economic downturn, there was unemployment riots, then ultimately, in 1984, you had the British miners' strike, which was huge. That was a huge event. The coal miners of Britain went on strike, and it was like a battle. It was like a pitched battle, and people died. And, it's out of that era, when Thatcher came in, the beginning of of austerity, first major economic downturn, that's where punk rock comes out of. And you have the Sex Pistols, and you have the Clash and others. And that, some punk rock elements were fascist, right? For example, David Bowie, I believe he was associated with punk rock, if I'm not mistaken. He was blatantly embraced fascism. He said that Britain needed a strong fascist leader, but other punk rock folks like the Clash and such, they were more left-wing, right? They were supporting the Labor Party and like some of the Trotskyite elements in the Labor Party, like the militant tendency and others. Now, a man that I do have a weird kind of admiration for, I like his music in an ironic way, is Cornelius Cardew. And Cornelius Cardew said, quote, "Punk rock is fascist." And he actually wrote a pamphlet called "Punk Rock is Fascist," which I really, really want to read. I don't know where I'll be able to find it. I have yet to find a copy of it online or anything, but I really want to read "Punk Rock is Fascist" by Cornelius Cardew. I bet it's amazing, right? I bet it's amazing, but I can't find it. Maybe I don't know why he would think punk rock is fascist. I know he didn't like David Bowie, Cornelius Cardew actually wrote a full pamphlet, "Punk Rock is Fascist," which I don't agree with, and I think is probably very hilarious. The pamphlet. That's why I want to read it so bad. I really want to read it. I want to see what it says. Cornelius Cardew, I like him in a little bit of an ironic way. The lyrics are a little forced. The lyrics to his songs are a little bit forced. But I like Cornelius Cardew kind of ironically. I like that his music is just full of revolutionary enthusiasm, and he understands Marxist-Leninist concepts, and he's trying his best. He was an experimental composer from the Stockhausen school, and then he had this revelation and became a Maoist, right? First he was a Maoist, and then when Albania and China had their falling out, he was with Albania. He was a Hoxhaist. He really believed in communism. I believe he did prison time for some, street fighting or something, or some like revolutionary activism. And he really believed in communism with all his heart and soul. And if you listen to Cornelius Cardew, his People's Liberation music from the 1980s, that becomes very, very, very clear. And I like it, and I appreciate that he was so fervent in his communist beliefs, before he died. I appreciate Cornelius Cardew. And Cornelius Cardew said punk rock is fascist. I don't know if punk rock is fascist, but I will say that honestly, and this isn't the popular thing to say on the left, I have become more and more appreciative of classical music, right? Every day, this is my routine. Every day I wake up in the morning and I put on classical music and I drink unnamed diet beverages. I wake myself up, and every night before I go to sleep, I listen to classical music. And I've realized that classical music very much clears out the emotions, right? So much of the music we listen to, not just punk rock, regular rock, country music, rap music, hip-hop, so much of the music that we listen to in our time is just seething with emotions, just seething with heavy emotions, anger, sex, joy, sadness, rage. It's just seething with emotions. If you're somebody like me who's already seething with emotions, you want to be more rational. You want to think more clearly. So I've learned to wake up with Beethoven, or Bach, or Mozart, or Haydn, or Handel. And I've realized that has made a huge difference in my life. Huge difference in my life. Huge difference. That little act, that little ritual that I do every night and every morning has made such a huge difference in my life. I still do listen to, I listen to the Clash. I got the Clash. I'll tell you about my relationship with punk rock. I got the Clash. They had a CD. Do folks know what a CD? It's like this ancient item, but when it used to be, I got a lot of my music from the public library, where my mother worked, and they had From Here to Eternity, a recording of a Clash concert, a live album by the Clash. I got that album from the library, and I listened to it, and I really liked it. I really liked the Clash, and I got into the Clash. And then also during the Bush years, there was a punk rock band called Anti-Flag. And Anti-Flag were like anarchists, but their albums quoted Noam Chomsky, and I got kind of into them. So that's basically my relationship. I liked the Clash. I developed a taste for the Clash, and I appreciated Anti-Flag. But I could never get into the Sex Pistols. Never could do that. Never could get into the Sex Pistols. But there you go. That's my relationship with punk rock, as limited as it is. That's it. So, yeah, there you go. There you go. But yes, like I said, the classical music ritual made an amazing difference. Exercising. This is my advice, right? Take it or leave it, right? No one's making you do this. And people always react so angrily when I put this forward. Not everybody. A lot of people are like, oh, that's good advice. But whenever I tell people my little suggestions for how to be a happier person, there's always people who just explode with rage. Well, I'll give you my little advice. Number one, listen to classical music every morning when you wake up and every night before you go to bed. Number one. Number two, don't do drugs. Don't do drugs. Right? Alcohol, marijuana, hallucinogens, cocaine, don't do that. 3, exercise. Try to exercise. Try to take some time to go to the gym. If you can do those things, your life will improve. Your life will improve if you do those things. Now, is that going to solve all your problems overnight? No, right? Is that going to help you deal with everything? Is your life immediately just going to magically get better? No. But I've discovered that by doing those things, I have become a much happier person. Much happier person, right? Classical music, no drugs or alcohol, and exercise, right? And if you can do those three things, your life may improve, but it may not, right? And, the last thing you ever want to do, you want to make realistic goals, right? There's a lot of people who get in this mode, they're like, no, be realistic. Be realistic, all right? We all have vices, right? We all have vices. Unnamed diet beverage is one of my biggest vices. I have other vices too. We all have things that are probably not too good for us that we do. But figure out which of those things you need to get rid of and which of those things you can do without. That's my advice. Now, if you seethe with rage, if this is pure 100% smoking gun proof that I'm a fascist trying to destroy your life, sorry. That's all I can do. Can't help you. I'm not trying to ruin your life, not trying to make you miserable. But, there you go. All righty. Venezuela economic zone. Well, look, Venezuela needs foreign investment. They need foreign investment. The imperialists have crippled their economy. They have crippled their economy, and they need foreign investment. Venezuela's economy is much less state-run than China's is, right? The oil is in the hands of the government. The government gives subsidies to a lot of private companies. There are a lot of worker cooperatives that are subsidized by the Venezuelan government. There's a lot of private stuff in the Venezuelan economy. The special economic zone is an attempt to bring some foreign investment in. That's what it looks like to me. Look, they can't make up their minds. 1 minute, Venezuela is starving and they're all miserable because of socialism, and socialism never works. The next minute, Venezuela is abandoning socialism and they're fake socialism. It's like, make up your mind. Which one is it? So there you go. Now, Venezuela, economic zone. They need foreign investment. They need it. All right. How could America's homeless problem be solved? Well, here's the thing, okay? Now, on some level, you're always going to have some homeless people, okay? You go to Cuba, there are people they refer to as homeless people, but all those people are guaranteed a job, guaranteed health care, guaranteed housing, but they're still homeless because of some kind of mental health thing. And they have, they're voluntarily homeless, they're mentally ill, right? And that happens, okay? So there's always going to be some layer of homeless people. But if you look at what's happening in Seattle right now, you look at what's happening in Southern California right now, I talk about Skid Row and all of that. This is not normal. Look what's happening on the streets of New York City. This is not normal, right? This is not normal. And what a lot of those folks need is jobs, jobs, jobs. Good paying jobs. That's what they need. One day during the pandemic, I was out on the street filming. This family walked up to me, and I could tell. They didn't look like other homeless people. It was a wife and a husband and a kid, and they're walking around, and they're just walking up to anybody. Do you know a place we might be able to get a job? They're trying their hardest not to look homeless. They're staying in a shelter. They're desperate. Jobs. All right, we have a 4-point plan to rescue the country for the Center for Political Innovation. It's reprinted in the new book. Step 1, mass mobilization to rebuild the country. Step 2, to pay for it, public control of natural resources. Step 3, public control of banking, so credit is strategically assigned. And Step 4, an economic bill of rights. And jobs, jobs, jobs. And to be fair, right, people say, well, there's always going to be homeless people because of the mental health thing. Yeah, but, and there's a pretty big yeah, but. All right? People say, all the homeless people I've ever met are crazy. So, no, it's not a social, it's just a mental health problem. Here's the thing. Sometimes it's chicken or the egg. Right? This needs to be said. Sometimes it's chicken or the egg. Right? You say, oh, they're homeless because they're crazy. No, it might be they're crazy because they're homeless. Imagine living on the street. That is not good for one's mental health. Not knowing where you're going to eat, not knowing where you're going to sleep tonight, hiding under a bridge to sleep, sleeping on a park bench and having a cop, beat you up and arrest you and take you to jail in the middle of the night. Homelessness is not good for one's mental health. I can guarantee you that there are a lot of people that were very, very sane when they became homeless, and over the course of living on the streets for a few months, became crazy, right? Being homeless is devastating for the mental health. So, when people just say, oh, all homeless people are crazy, be careful with that. Now, there are some people that, yes, they're drug addicts or they're schizophrenic or whatever. That's true for some. But don't forget that some people might be crazy because they're homeless, not homeless because they're crazy, right? And that's an important thing. And that you have to be careful with this, because there's a lot of people who struggle with mental health who aren't homeless, right? I mean, geez, 1 in 5 Americans is on antidepressants at this point. So there's a lot of people that are struggling with mental health who aren't homeless, but that's a way to dehumanize people, right? You say, oh, they're all just mentally ill. Well, what about the people who are mentally ill? If you work at a company, how many of your, statistically, 1 in 5 of your coworkers is on psych meds. So 1 in 5 of your coworkers probably has a mental health problem. Would you want them to be homeless? So you can't use that to just say, oh, I don't care about those people, right? Well, they're mentally ill. Who cares about them? No, right? Mental health is a big, big problem in U.S. society. So simply saying, oh, who cares about homeless people? They're mentally ill. No, 1 in 5 Americans is mentally ill at this point, my friend. So be careful with all of that. But yeah, ultimately, jobs, and more jobs. And that comes when we have a government of action that fights for working families. We need a government of action that fights for working families. We need a government of action that fights for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Facebook's extremism thing, that's the dumbest thing ever. Turn in your friends. That's one of them. I got the you might have seen extremist content. I'm like, yeah, I see U.S. government extremism all the time. They're promoting wars and all that. But some people actually got on Facebook, they got a message that said, I kid you not, do you have a friend who might be becoming an extremist? Turn them in here. Right? Definition of means of production, right? So there you go. Means of production. Okay, so there you go. Post 100 years celebration. Well, look, President Xi Jinping of China, amazing speech. Absolutely amazing. I mean, they're communists in China. Don't tell me they're not communists in China. Don't give me that. They're communists in China. They are absolutely communists in China. But they don't seek to export their system. And their form of communism, their socialism with Chinese characteristics, is specific to China. They're not trying to export their system. Tim Pool is on there, oh my God, when China comes here, they're going to do this and that. No, they're not. China doesn't even do that with their allies now. China is not interested in spreading their system around the world, but they are definitely communists. Is Rachel Maddow the new McCarthy? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, she's promoting, basically promoting, be afraid, be very afraid, Russia. That's McCarthyism, right? Guilt by association. I will never forget when Andrew Yang was being interviewed by Rachel Maddow. That was really something special. And Andrew Yang says, she asked about Russian meddling. And Andrew Yang says, well, we've meddled in governments around the world. And I kid you not, Rachel Maddow goes, where? Seriously. I mean, Rachel Maddow says to Andrew Yang, where have we meddled in elections? Now, I mean, Rachel Maddow's not an idiot. She is not an idiot. All right, she was on Air America. You know, you want to talk about dishonesty. You want to talk about someone who sold their soul to Satan. I mean, where have we ever meddled? All right, or another one I saw from Rachel Maddow. Rachel Maddow was on there, and she was talking about alleged Russian meddling. She's like, imagine if America intervened in a Russian election. Sorry, can you think of an election since the fall of the Soviet Union that America has not intervened in? Like, you know, there's a whole issue of Time magazine where the U.S. government officials and the Clinton administration brag about how they worked really hard to get Boris Yeltsin reelected and keep the communists from winning the election in 1996. I mean, this woman, and she knows better. You know, I mean, if she was just stupid, I think a lot of the Fox people are just stupid. But she ain't stupid. That's disgusting. It's disgusting. She knows better. She knows better. That's why I don't like Miss Maddow. I don't know enough about El Salvador and Bitcoin. El Salvador is in a world of hurt. I know they've had some progressive governments there, and they're in a world of hurt. You know, and Bitcoin is something they're trying to deal with their problem. But there you go. Look, in Venezuela, you know, the U.S. dollar and the sanctions and the transactions in dollars, that's a weakness for the socialist countries, for the anti-imperialist countries. And by locking them out, that's a way of hurting them. So, you know, Venezuela is trying to use Bitcoin. Again, they're in a world of hurt, and it's something they can do. But ultimately, I don't feel very positive about cryptocurrency. I own some of it because I have Odyssey, right? I use Odyssey, and for every video you upload on Odyssey, you get a little bit of whatever their cryptocurrency is. So I have some. So maybe I'm a hypocrite, right? There's probably someone that's sitting there going, "He's a phony, phony." That's right. I'm a phony. That's right. I am critical and skeptical of cryptocurrency, and I own some. Phony! Phony! Well, I may be a phony. I do own some cryptocurrency because I have an Odyssey account. I upload my videos on Odyssey as well as YouTube. So, but I'm not inspired by cryptocurrency. And I think, you know, the next crash that happens, they're going to blame it on cryptocurrency. It won't be because of cryptocurrency. It'll be because of capitalism. But it'll be easier to scapegoat and say, oh, it was just cryptocurrency. See those libertarian geeks with their computers? They ruined our economy. Well, it's actually a breakdown of the capitalist system, but I think that's what they're going to say. The next time the economy goes kerplunk, W.E.B. Du Bois, just be ready for them to say it was all cryptocurrency's fault, because that's what they're going to say. And there will be an element of truth in it, because cryptocurrency, I think, is speculation. You're making money out of nothing. And, you know, so there you go. All right. The RICO law. Well, the RICO law was in the 70s, right? And that was like originally a law used to fight against organized crime. But it was basically one of these laws where federal prosecutors can get anybody. Right? That's basically what it is. You talked to somebody who talked to somebody who talked to somebody who may have sold some drugs. And it was the RICO law. They used it to go after organized crime in the 70s, but it was one of these laws they could use to go after anybody. And that's how a lot of federal laws are. There's a book called, 3 Felonies a Day. And it talks about the federal prosecution in the United States. They can get anybody if they want to. They can get anybody. They can get anybody. They just have to feel like it's worth investing all the millions of dollars of time and research to prepare a case against them and all of that. But, and that's why, Trump is awful. Trump University was a rip-off scam. Trump is a liar, but do you think that they're going after his people right now because they are just interested in justice, right? This is just the natural, where they're just, come on. It's about January 6th, about fights in the ruling class. I'm not stupid here, so there you go. All right. Nicaragua migration. Yeah, well, that's true. People are fleeing Honduras. People are fleeing Guatemala. People are not fleeing Nicaragua. because of socialism. With socialism, they've made life pretty good for a lot of people in Nicaragua. People are rising out of poverty. Go watch Ramiro Funes. He made a great movie about it, Nicaragua Against Empire. It's very, very good. And I interviewed him about his experiences in Nicaragua. The Sandinistas of Nicaragua are doing a great job, a great job. And of course, that's why U.S. media calls them dictators. They're doing a great job raising their people out of poverty. They are Christian socialists, Marxists, anti-imperialists, Daniel Ortega. They're doing a great job. All right. There's talk about Viktor Orban, the leader of Hungary, and the possibility of a coup. Well, Viktor Orban is more friendly to Russia than other leaders of Hungary. You know, he's pretty right-wing, but he's more friendly to Russia. He's not a puppet of the West, right? He's more friendly to Russia. And he's kind of like, you know, he's a lot like Erdogan. He's a lot like Modi in India. He's one of these leaders, like Duterte in the Philippines, who's more independent. Not a socialist, not a communist by any means, but just a little bit more independent. And that's what U.S. imperialism doesn't like. It wants everyone to de facto serve them. And that's what their beef with Urban is, right? And, you know, and Urban, he'll do business with Russia. He'll do business with the United States. Just he weighs the benefits and says, I'm going to do what's best for me. He ain't a puppet of the imperialists. And that's what their issue with him is. I haven't seen this movie about Mark Lane, Rush to Judgment. I haven't seen it, so I can't comment on it. All right. Generational wealth in communist society. Well, look, personal wealth is not something communists oppose. They have always distinguished between personal property and private property. Private property is means of production. It's property that you use to make profits from, that you invest in order to get a return on your investment and make profits. That is what communists ultimately want to abolish, right? And they want to make private property work in the interest of all society. But personal wealth, homes, cars, you know, furniture, computers, these things, we want people to have as much personal wealth as possible, right? Personal wealth is not something communists are really interested in. Obviously, there will be some form of taxation, right? There'll be income tax and things like that in a socialist society. But, you know, communism is not about abolishing personal property. It's about abolishing private property. So in terms of generational wealth, if it's personal wealth, it's not, people aren't inheriting factories and companies and oil wells and big box stores, but, you know, if someone has a house and they die and they want to pass their house on to their kids, what could be wrong with that, right? Again, we're not about abolishing personal property. This idea that communists want everyone to be poor is bullshit, all right? Communists want everyone to be rich. In fact, we want there to be so much wealth that the need for the state itself can wither away, from each according to his own ability, to each according to his needs. Vast material abundance. Go read the Critique of the Goethe Program. Karl Marx explicitly opposes the idea that socialism is about the redistribution of wealth. And he says, no, it's about changing property relations. Right? RedTube ought to read some Marx. Steve Hassan, will read my book, right? I don't want to talk about him too much on here, but he's an individual. He's the deprogrammer, right? During the 1970s, you know, you had the cult scare in the 70s. There was something called the Cult Awareness Network. There were a lot of kidnappings that went on. I don't want to talk about him too much on these streams, but he's in the book. If you want to learn about Steve Hassan and what he has to do with BreadTube, check this out. I don't, Jimmy, off the top of my head, I don't. Check out the book. I don't want to get into it too much on the streams, but check out the book. It's in the book. It's in the book. Alrighty. All right, books on dialectical materialism. Well, it's funny because I have two books that were published by international publishers, and one of them is huge, and it's a Soviet textbook on dialectical materialism. One of them is extremely short, and it's like an essay by a British academic on dialectical materialism. But generally, if you want to get into books on these concepts, get something by international publishers. Right? Get something published, get a Soviet textbook, right? Get Fundamentals of Marxism, Leninism. You know, don't get something published by Adorno or one of these, you know, bullshit, you know, postmodernist, you know, get the good books, you have to dig for them. You have to dig for them. But I learned Marxism. I didn't learn Marxism from Slavoj Žižek. You know, I learned Marxism from William Z. Foster and Gus Hall and international publishers. Get your hands, you know, read. There's the chapter on dialectical materialism in the book, the Soviet book, in the History of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Short course is very good. right? Get a Soviet textbook. Get a Soviet textbook. Get a Communist Party book from the 1930s. Get an international publisher's book. Don't waste your time with this academic crap. Right? Right? That's my advice. If you want to learn Marxist concepts, learn it from actual Marxists, not from academics. Right? William Z. Foster, Gus Hall, there's a lot. Victor Perlow. Get your hands on some real communist publications, right? The economic freedom fighters in South Africa. Well, I've said many times before that I hope that all the revolutionaries in South Africa can be in the same party. Right now, there's the South African Communist Party is in an alliance with the African National Congress. Many people feel the African National Congress has sold out, but many also feel that it hasn't. So there's this new party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, the EFF, and my hope is that eventually all the South African communists are in one party, and that they can move ahead toward a more prosperous and socialist society. I would not call South Africa a socialist country right now. I would say the communists have a lot of influence. It's like a popular front government, but ultimately, it's still capitalist property relations. The role of China in South Africa is particularly good, but there's a lot of division, and the split between the African National Congress and the EFF is kind of a manifestation of a lot of the frustration there. So my hope is they can move ahead, get beyond a lot of the corruption that they're having. There you go. All right. China haunts imperialism. You bet it does. That's a country that broke free. It used to be the sick man of Asia. Now they are a superpower. Socialism and communism did that. Chinese Communist Party did that. And you're very welcome, Andre. There you go. Thank you, Andre, for the super chat. Much appreciated. The family is the source of self-alienation. Well, that's an interesting way of putting it, There's truth in that. There's absolutely truth in that. Look, a lot of times, and this is part of growing up, I would argue, a lot of times the way you see yourself is very much through your parents' eyes, right? And that can be good, right? But can also be bad. And that often, we come out of our childhoods. We enter early adulthood. When we're 18, 19, 20, we enter the world with an image of ourselves that comes from our parents. And our parents are just people. They're the people who, gave birth to us or adopted us if we're adopted. But they're still just two people, right? Your mother, your father, or your mother and your mother, or your mother or your father if you had a single family, or if you had gay parents, or whatever. Your parents are just two people, or just one person, or whatever, right? And they are a very important person in your life, and they probably have a huge impact on your development. But at the end of the day, they're just two people. You are biologically related to them, but at the end of the day, they're just two people. But often the way you see yourself is through the eyes of your parents. And in some cases, if you see yourself in a way that might not be good, that might be rooted in the fact that you only see yourself through your parents' eyes. And part of growing up is learning to see yourself through other people's eyes, right? You might hold on to some of how your parents saw you, but you might learn to see yourself from the eyes of a college professor. You might learn to see yourself from the eyes of a therapist. Actually, in Sigmund Freud, this is his concept of transference, is that as we go through life, we find people, we transfer this perception of self we get from our parents onto different people, onto other people we might admire. We might admire a teacher that we have. We might admire a very good friend or a mentor, right? And that as we go through life, part of maturing is transference, right? And I think this is something that, Sigmund Freud, the problem with Freud, and I actually, this is fair, right? I know Jordan Peterson said this, and he says a lot of bull crap. But one thing he said that's true is that Sigmund Freud, he was bad in a lot of ways. But everything that he was right about, he doesn't get credit for. We just consider it to be common sense. And everything that he was wrong about, we ridicule and laugh at him for. That's true. There's a lot of things that come from Freud, right? That we just go, yeah, so what? Projection, right? When people often attribute their own attributes to other people. That's projection. Well, Freud thought of that. Well, no one gives Freud credit for that. We all just go, that's whatever, right? Those sibling rivalries. There's a lot of stuff in Freud. And that is decent stuff, right? Amid the crazy stuff. Thank you, Brian. Amid the crazy stuff, there was a lot of good stuff in Freud, but all the stuff from Freud that was good, we just think of it as common sense, okay? And all the crazy stuff from Freud about, penis envy and Oedipus complex and, anal retentive and all that kind of stuff, that all sounds crazy. And so we use that, we laugh at that stuff. And the stuff that Freud came up with, which was not in the culture before, and was kind of profound at the time he said it, now we just go, that's common sense. Of course there's sibling rivalries. Of course children compete for their parents' affection. What's profound about that? Well, at the time that Freud talked about it, no one talked about that before, right? I mean, we talk about, transference, right? The fact that when you are a child, your parents, especially when you're a small child, but even as when you're living in your parents' household, your parents are the two most important people in your life, or the one most important people, or whatever, right? And part of growing up is learning to transfer, right? And see yourself in a different life. And I think that that's what this person who super chatted me about family self-alienation, I think that's what they're getting at, right? Is that, look, I'm not against people having families, having kids. I don't have any kids. I don't want to ever have kids, but it's one thing my wife and I agree on. But I love my wife. I'm glad I live with her, and I have a lot of very close friends. I'm not against families, and I this abolish the family stuff is a little stupid in my view. The family is a product of material conditions. It was different in hunter-gatherer civilization. It was different under feudalism, and it's different now. And there's no sacred way the family is. It's changing over time. But I'm not against families, right? Human beings are going to group together, and there's going to be romantic love, and there's going to be parents and children, and that's just, but at the same time, I think when you talk about self-alienation, right, there can be an example of a time where people they think of themselves through their parents' eyes, and as a result of that, right, their perception of themselves is damaged, right? And I don't know if you've ever known people like this. I've known people like this who go through life with a voice in their head that says, I can't. Right? And I consider myself to be very lucky because I don't have a lot of that. Look, I'm on here, talking to all of you off the top of my head, answering your questions. I don't have a lot of that. And a lot of people have it far more than I do. They have this voice in their head that says, I can't. You can't do it. You can't do it, right? They get excited about, they're going to, write a book, or they're going to, go apply for a new job. And then suddenly they get this voice in the back of their mind, this sinister, evil voice that says, you can't do that. You're not going to be successful. Everyone's going to laugh at you. You're going to fail. They get this voice in the back of their head. And that is one of the most destructive things, that exists, is that voice. That voice is one of the most destructive, evil things. And there are so many beautiful works of art that have not been constructed because of that voice. There are many amazing scientists, people that were capable of becoming an Einstein, who never did it because of that voice, right? And getting people to get beyond that voice is very important. Getting people to overcome that. Good to see you streaming, Caleb. Keep it up. Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. Getting people to get beyond that voice, right, and to suppress that is one of the most important things we can do. And often that voice that people have in the back of their head that says, you can't succeed, you're going to fail, that evil voice they have is the voice of an abusive parent. It's the voice of a parent, a mother or a father who is disappointed in their own life and is angry at the optimism of their child. The optimism their child has reminds them of their own disappointments. And so they pour rage in the form of verbal abuse. I saw the W.B. Du Bois thing. They pour rage in the form of verbal abuse, in the form of put downs and degrading and mockery. They pour that onto their child because they almost feel like their child is taunting them, right? Their child is full of hope. They're young, they're in the early stages of their life, the world, the possibilities are there, and the parent is frustrated with their own life and disappointed, and they hear that optimism in the child's voice. They hear that optimism in the child's voice, and it inspires rage in them. All right? And by doing that, you set the child up for a life of having that "you can't" voice in their head. And then that becomes a cycle, because they have that voice in their head that stops them from going out and doing great things and accomplishing things. Because they have that voice in their head, they then don't live up to their own potential. And then when they have a child of their own, their child comes along and is full of hope and optimism, and they cut them down. And it becomes a cycle. Right? You talk about generational trauma and all of that. And we're not even talking about physical abuse here. This is not, no one's hitting anybody else, no neglect here. We're just talking about verbal abuse. And what a parent says to their child can have a huge impact. A huge impact. What is this super chat I missed? Is it W.B. Du Bois? Because I got that one. Is it Brian? Which is the super chat I missed? People are telling me I missed a super chat. Which one is it? Which one is it? But, just tell me which one it is. Everyone's telling me I missed a super chat. Can you tell me which one it is? Right? If a person owns a 3D printer, means of production. I wrote that down already. Means of production. Is that the super chat that I missed? Because I wrote that one down. What is means of production? The Mark Lane one. I saw that. I don't know who Mark Lane is. I'll have to look it up afterwards. I saw that. All right. Means of production. 3D printer. All right. Okay. All right. But anyway, what I was saying was that we're just talking about words here. That's all we're talking about. Words. And words have a very big impact. So there you go. They have a very big impact. Thank you. So there you go. And thank you, ALQK, Red Rose and a dove. That's very kind of you. I did see that super chat, everybody. Did see it. Red Rose and a dove from ALJK, or AL, what is it? AIQK. All right, very good. All right, Mark Lane is a lawyer, and I don't remember. I'll have to look that up. But anyway, I think that's what the person who was asking about family self-alienation, I think that's what they were getting at. And again, I am not a therapist. I am not a psychologist. I have no degree in psychology. So don't take my word for it. If you're struggling with these issues, you should really see a professional, right? I'm giving you off the top of my head, over the years of talking to my friends and knowing people and hearing what people have been through and having conversations, this is what I've determined, okay? But again, I'm just a dude, right? I'm a dude, I'm a journalist, I'm a political analyst, I'm an activist, or I have a history of activism. I'm not in activism right now. That's who I am, right? So you ask me my opinion, I give you my opinion. But, there's probably people that are far more qualified to talk about these specific topics than I am. All right, whataboutism. Okay, so whataboutism, right? It's the tu quo que fallacy, right? It's no, you are, right? So the idea is, I don't know, right? Venezuela accuses the United States, says to the United States, sanctions are a disaster. You're putting horrendous sanctions on us. And the United States says, yeah, well, you violate human rights in Venezuela. Well, and that's a logical fallacy, right? Sing a communist song with Jackie Chan. Right? So Venezuela accuses the United States, says what you do to us is not fair with sanctions. And they say, yeah, well, what you do is, that's not an answer, right? You get a speeding ticket, right? You're pulled over, and the cop gives you a speeding ticket, and you go to court to fight your ticket. You can't get up and say, sure, I was speeding, but there's like 5 other people that were speeding. The judge is going to say, well, it's your speeding ticket. If you're charged with murder, you cannot defend yourself by saying, sure, I killed the guy, but what about all these other people that killed people? The judge is not going to go, oh, that's a good point, right? This is, it's tu quoque. Well, you also. Not really a very strong argument. Now, in some cases, right, now if there's an election, for example, there's only two candidates, and your argument why you should vote for one candidate is the other guy is a piece of shit. Well, the other guy is a piece of shit too, is kind of an argument. So there's some context where it might make sense, right? If there's a situation where you only have two choices, and you're trying to convince somebody of why one choice is better than the others, then tu quoque can be valid. Simply because it's a contest. You're determining which one is better, and if it can be a factor, right? Okay, Russia not socialist. It can be a factor. But at the end of the day, right, whataboutism, tu quoque, is a logical fallacy. What disturbs me is that, when I was arguing with Destiny, he tried to pull, well, that's just whataboutism on me. And I said, no, it's not whataboutism. I said, that is not whataboutism. He tried to say that I was just using whataboutism. And I said, no, you know what I mean? He was saying socialism had never worked anywhere. And I was saying, actually, yes, it has. And then he was saying, oh, yeah, well, it doesn't really count because there was famines. And I say, I think there's famines in capitalism. He said, oh, but that's whataboutism. And I remember at one point in the debate, I said, that's not my argument, Destiny. I'm pointing out that socialism does work. You're trying to discredit it by saying it has problems. And I'm pointing out those problems that you say discredit my system are far more prevalent under your system. So sometimes people will run to, well, that's whataboutism. They will run to that. And it's not always whataboutism. You got to be careful with whataboutism. You got to be careful with it. But at the same time, there's a lot of things, that are not whataboutism. So there you go, right? All right. The definition of means of production, like what if somebody has a 3D printer? There you go, right? I mean, in Vietnam, in Nicaragua, a lot of people have become micro-entrepreneurs. They own their own means of production. They are an individual entrepreneur. But the production that they carry out is in coordination with the state. Now, obviously, if someone owns a 3D printer and they're just doing stuff for themselves, not to sell, that doesn't count as private property. That's personal property, right? If you're using your 3D printer in your house for your own personal pleasure, that's personal property. If you have a 3D printer and people are lining up to use it and you're charging them so much to use it, at that point it's means of production. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have it, right? Again, a lot of socialist... that's the exact scenario I was thinking of. Okay, very good. A lot of socialist countries, have micro-entrepreneurship programs. I've seen this in Venezuela. I saw it in Ecuador, where Rafael Correa had these programs. And that, micro-entrepreneurship, the formation of cooperatives. Look, in a socialist society, there are going to be different forms of property. There will obviously be state property, government-run industries, state-controlled natural resources. But there's going to be cooperative property. The collective farms, for example, in the USSR, sold their goods to the state, right? Now, the government, paid them for how much wheat they grew. They got paid. It wasn't a state-run industry where they all got an hourly wage or whatever. It was, no, you produce this much in your collective farm. The government buys it from you at a set rate. So it was a cooperative. It was cooperative property. It wasn't state property. The collective farms were owned by the people who worked in them, and they all got paid based on how much was produced. So there will be cooperatives of some degree. Huawei Technologies in China is a cooperative. It's not a state industry. It's technically a cooperative. Now, it functions in the part of the overall central plan, but it's not government-owned. It's a cooperative owned by shareholders, and it practices profit sharing. But there will also be straight-up private enterprises. I think that there will be private hotels and private restaurants in socialism in the United States. I think there will be private tech companies. That will exist. The main thing is they won't function according to market logic. They'll be forced to work in the interest of the overall state central plan. That's the idea. In a socialist economy, you can have private means of production. You can have cooperative means of production. But overall, you're going to have a lot of state means of production. But at the end of the day, as long as the economy is not functioning on the basis of profits, that's socialism. Let me repeat myself. I say it in the book. Chapter 2 is all about this. I say it in the book, and I'm going to say it again. The difference between capitalism and socialism is this. Capitalism is production for profit. Socialism is production for social use. Under capitalism, houses get built so that profits can be made from them. Under capitalism, food is grown and produced so that profits can be made from it. In socialism, houses are produced because people need to live in them. In socialism, food is produced because people need something to eat. Capitalism equals production for profit. Socialism equals production for social use. The way you get production for social use is you have a government of action that forces the economy to work for the benefit of society. You have a state, a government that forces the economy, might be private companies, might be cooperative enterprises, might be state industries. You have a government on behalf of the population forcing the economy to work in the interest of public good. You abolish the anarchy of production. That's what socialism is. Now, state capitalism, right? Singapore, a lot of government involvement, but it's still capitalism because the government facilitates the making of production for profit for those who own the means of production. Saudi Arabia, the government, everything's nationalized, right? The government, royal family owns about everything, but it's still capitalism because the government just facilitates money flowing into the hands of people. Socialism is not synonymous with state ownership. China has a big private sector. Venezuela has a big private sector. But these are socialist countries because they have a state that forces the economy to work for the benefit of public good. That's socialism, right? Whereas Singapore, Saudi Arabia might be a big government involvement, but it's still production for profit. Capitalism is production for profit. Socialism is production for social use. That's the difference. That is the difference. Socialism is production for society. Capitalism is production for capital. All right, W.E.B. Du Bois joining the Communist Party. And my energy is running low, folks. My energy is running low. So I see this. How soon do you think it will be until GDP per capita reaches first world standards, right? China, GDP, first world. I'm running out of energy here, so we're going to get quick answers here, but there you go. W.E.B. Du Bois joining the Communist Party. Read his letter. There's a book called Fighting Racism by Gus Hall, and it actually has W.E.B. Du Bois' letter of how he joined the Communist Party and why he joined the Communist Party. It has a letter to Gus Hall in which he makes clear why he's joining the Communist Party. It's a beautiful letter. The autobiography of W.E.B. Du Bois, the first section, like the intro, is called Communism. It's all about how communism is the future. W.E.B. Du Bois, amazing stuff. You want to get further into that. W.E.B. Du Bois, there's some speeches where he talks about Tibet and the Dalai Lama, and the overthrow of the Dalai Lama. There's pictures of W.E.B. Du Bois with Mao. W.E.B. Du Bois was a tankie. If you think tankies are the same as Nazis, you're saying the greatest African-American scholar, W.E.B. Du Bois, is somehow a Nazi. And you are wrong. All right. Would I sing a song with Jackie Chan? Of course. Jackie Chan's awesome. I would just meet Jackie Chan, right? I mean, if someone could arrange for me to meet Jackie Chan, that would be awesome. I don't even have to sing with him. But if you wanted me to sing a song with Jackie Chan, awesome, right? Is this a trap? Is this some kind of meme? And then someone's going to like take a video of this and be like, Caleb said. I think Jackie Chan's pretty cool, and if Jackie Chan and me are going to sing together, it's a very bizarre super chat question. I can't imagine why I wouldn't want to do that. So there you go. It's a very bizarre question. I don't know. Usually when things are bizarre, it's some kind of meme, and so I'm going to see a video of myself or something. I don't know. Who cares? Whatever. All right. Why do I support Russia when Russia is not socialist? Because imperialism is the main enemy of humanity, and it is the duty of socialists to support any country that is standing against imperialism. And furthermore, Russia is an ally of the people of Syria who are fighting for their national liberation. Russia is an ally of the people of Venezuela who are fighting for their national liberation. Need I go on? Russia is an anti-imperialist country. It is, it does not call itself a socialist country. They don't believe in Marxism over there. They believe in Orthodox Christianity, more of a nationalist and traditionalist perspective. But, Putin came in and he put natural gas under public ownership, reoriented the economy around state-controlled natural resources, stopped the crisis created by neoliberalism and austerity. And as a result of that, life in Russia has gotten better. Russia is very friendly to Vietnam, to Cuba. I mean, yeah, Russia's on the right side of history. So, that may be too much for you to accept, right? You may have been told that Russia's the boogeyman, Russia's evil. Well, again, you don't want to hear it. I'm not a grifter. You don't want to hear it, but it's true. Russia is on the right side of history, and so am I, and so is the city-building tendency. All right, when will China reach the GDP of the first world? I think it might be soon, because right now their economy is speeding ahead, and the West is in a big crisis, and the pandemic has made that crisis even worse. So I don't think it may not be may not take as long as we think. I mean, China's still, it's a huge country. There's still, extreme poverty has been eliminated, but there's still a lot of people who are, just getting running water and just getting electricity. So they have a lot to move ahead, but they have a planned economy. So there you go. And I think it may be pretty soon. So there you go. All right, folks, I am at the end of my rope, and that's the end of the Super Chats. So I'm going to end the same way we always end. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. We need a government of action to fight for working families. Fusion City now. Good night.